Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another Sarah Jane Adventures review. And today's Sarah Jane Adventures review is none other than Lost in Time. So, what is Lost in Time about? Well, essentially, Sarah Jane, Clyde, and Rani get invited to a very mysterious looking old antique shop, and when they get there, a peculiar man with a parrot seems to be waiting for them. He points out that the vestiges of time, or however he puts it, have called Sarah Jane and her friends here because time is broken and it needs her and her companions to figure out a way to fix it and set it back on track. Now, the man in the antique shop doesn't exactly give away who he is, but later on in Doctor Who, we find out that he is known as the Corsair. Now, the Corsair is a very old friend of the Doctor's, and it turns out that in this story, the Corsair has the gusto to pop in on Sarah Jane and her friends and pretty much chuck them into two different time zones. Did I say two? Sorry, three. Sarah's mystery is to investigate with an investigator on exactly what's happening and why a woman from the 1800s can see into the far distant future, in which a woman accidentally leaves the kids locked inside of a room when she's supposed to be babysitting. Due to this, the house burns down and it keeps on playing at 12:01 over and over again. Rani Chandra finds herself stuck back in the Tudor times, where she becomes handmaiden to Mary, who will later be executed by Elizabeth. But in this story, it's not Elizabeth who's trying to execute Mary. Instead, it turns out it is one of Mary's own handmaidens who has come up with some plot that she has fantasized in her head that if she kills Mary quicker than the beheading, she will become in good favor to Elizabeth. Rani seeks out this individual and has to basically snitch her to the Queen to save the Queen's life and to save her own. Rani is then heralded as a kind of martyr in this story before going back to the modern time and bringing back the peace that she was asked to look for. Clyde becomes very good friends with a boy named Tommy, and the pair of them have to try and weasel out what's happening with the Germans on the British coast. It turns out that Nazi spies have gone ahead of the oncoming fleet to try and weasel out the best way to weaken the British forces. On top of this, it turns out that one of Tommy's teachers, who he really liked, is actually a Nazi sympathizer. Clyde and Tommy get themselves both tied to a chair, and Clyde manages to break out of the restraints and take the piece of the key that he's been looking for, which the Nazis were going to use as a weapon. Tommy manages to rat the Nazis out, and Clyde manages to go back to the modern day. However, time is ticking faster and faster, and Sarah manages to get back to the modern day, but doesn't actually manage to get the piece that she was looking for, which was the key in the door. However, luckily for Sarah, it turns out that the granddaughter of the woman that Sarah met back in the day was given the key and told to give it to Sarah on the exact day and the exact date that the Corsair had set the task on. The granddaughter none the wiser exactly what's going on, and then the Corsair points out to Sarah and her friends that their mission is now done and they can go back to their respective lives. When Sarah asks why they had to do this in the first place, he just simply says it was part of the universe and it put things in motion. Sarah takes this on the shoulder and tries to thank the man who had allowed them to come back home, but instead she finds that him and the parrot have disappeared. So, Sarah Jane Adventures, Lost in Time. What did I think of this story? I can't lie, this is not my favourite story out there, but I really do like the way that the Corsair is introduced to the Sarah Jane Adventures. Although he may not call himself the Corsair and just call himself the shopkeeper, I do definitely feel like that mystery that was underlined in this from the very beginning is what makes it so strong and intriguing. I also like that this is kind of Sarah Jane's version of the key to time, except instead of finding keys, she had to find fragments along with her friends to essentially save the universe from collapse. Especially with the idea of a Fisher being out there, I like that this kind of takes on the same sort of bravado and drama as the Torchwood story, in which Tosh and Jack get sent back in time. I feel like the comparisons between these two stories and a lot of things that happen in the Doctor Who universe are so brilliant that it makes me wish that we had more stories like this in the main Doctor Who TV show as a whole. And for that reason, I'm going to give this at least a solid 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next Sarah Jane Adventures review. Until then, goodbye, stay beautiful, you beautiful people.